Thank you. Thank you very much, Emma. Thank God for this opportunity. Thank you, Hedayah, for this chance to present some of the work that we've been doing. Can I just have the quick?
Oh.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm just going to share some findings that we have done. It was basically from one quantitative study, two qualitative studies, as well as two programs. We did a quantitative study into the perception of Malaysian youth on unity, violent extremism, and hate speech together with UNDP. We got around 1,200 respondents. Out of that, we had to take off a few because they did not complete, they did not fit in the age group. And so we had 828 respondents from that qualitative study. We also had a program with sports where we looked at sports for enhancing resilience and amplifying social inclusions. And we got some interesting findings on that, which I'd like to share. We looked at the role of resilience in particularly looking at PCV in the community. We did a qualitative study on the quest for personal significance. Basically, 2 months ago, we went to the Malaysian prisons and we interviewed 18 Malaysians who were arrested due to terrorism charges. And we tried to see how important significance was, and that we defined it by whether they were collectivistic or individualistic in the way they looked at themselves, whether they had death anxiety, whether they experienced previous failures. These were the indicators. And lastly, we did a program with young people on gaming. And what basically I want to do is I would like to share with you some of the findings that we derived from those. Number one, we realized that it was imperative to treat victims of hate speech. The data we got was relatively quite frightening. Out of the people that we interviewed, we have around 30% who said that they were at one point victims of hate speech. Now, that was extremely concerning for us. We did not expect it to be that high. But what was important here was that we realized that we have to treat these people who were victims of hate speech. And of course, because they are victims, we need to treat them. But more importantly, when we did our qualitative research, we found out that as we talked to the people who were actually pushing the hate speech narrative, these were not victims, these were the perpetrators of hate speech. When we talked to them, we found out, to our utmost horror, that at one point, they themselves were victims of hate speech. And oftentimes, that was the trigger for them to get involved in hate speech. So basically, hurt people then go on to hurt people. So then it became very important to us that, look, we not only have to treat these people because they are hurt, but if we do not reach out to them, if we do not sort of treat them, they run the huge risk of actually then in time pushing out the narrative. So that's the first thing that we learned. Number two, we found out about, we realized the importance of reversing neutrality. When we talked about rejecting violent extremism, when we talked about hate speech, we had a category which says, look, we gave statements like, do you reject violent extremism, hate speech? And there's always the I do not know. But we found that there was a huge category who had not made up their mind that hate speech was wrong, who had not made up their mind that violent extremism was wrong. And it was basically up for contestation. And what we realized is there were various violent extremist groups which were pushing out that, look, in certain situations, it's all right to behave in such a manner. In certain situations, this kind of out-group, it's necessary to call them out. So in those situations, they were pushed to a certain extent to think that hate speech, violent extremism was justified, and there was nothing on our side to show that that was wrong. So we realized that this huge group of people who were neutral would not be neutral in due time. It was just a matter of time because before they would shift into having a more open position and allowing hate speech. So the idea here was, the policy implication was this: we realized that we need to tackle indifference and reverse sympathy towards hate speech and violent extremism. And that we started doing by communicating with them and engaging with them, and I shall get into that in a bit. We realized the pursuit of significance. Again and again, we found out that the root cause was, it was not that they were joining violent extremist organizations because they were religious or anything like that, but they wanted to do something that gave them meaning in life. One chap told me, I was a zero. My parents think I'm an idiot. My teachers think I'm an idiot. And these guys, they told me that I was special. And for him, right, he said, that made me a hero. So the idea here is, We asked this question, particularly to the young offenders in jail, and they said this: joining the group gave me the sense that I could now contribute. I was looking for significance and meaning in life. If I had already found meaning and significance to begin with, I would never have joined the group. So we asked them this question, and a majority of them, nearly half of them, said yes, that was an important factor with regards to them joining. So the policy implication here is this: we need to emphasize the pursuit of significance. That means, when we give them education, it's not just about being an engineer or a doctor or a teacher or a plumber, but what you do gives significance. And you find that the education sector totally does not address this. It gives you the skill, the knowledge, the ability to be something, but it doesn't tell you that this gives you meaning in life. So not only must we tell them that, look, that you can do things that give you meaning in life, you need to provide them the options of actually obtaining that, the routes to actually achieve this particular significance. So it's not just important that you tell them that, look, there are many ways to address violent conflict. You need to actually show them how then can you do that. Can you join Doctors Without Borders? What is the process of joining Doctors Without Borders? So when we did that, we found out that we could actually reduce their propensity towards thinking about things which are violent. We need to find and equip our young champions. One of the things that we asked them was this: what is your reaction towards violent extremism and hate speech? And we found out that there was a huge cohort of young people who wanted to do something against violent extremism, who wanted to do something against hate speech, but they did not know how. And here we are in courses thinking, look, we are overloaded, we don't have enough people, we don't have enough resources. When we realized that these guys, they wanted to, and they were basically saying, we are here. Nobody's asking us to do anything. So the idea here is, how then do you convert this group? How then do you identify, train, and deploy these young people to counter violent extremism and hate speech? My point being, there is a sizable group of our people out there who want to help us out in this job, but we are not connecting to them, and that's a tragedy. We need to teach and educate non-violence. I know this sounds simple, but it's so sad, when you ask a group of young people, how many of you support violence in this place? They raise up their hands. How many of you support non-violence? And they don't know. Has it ever worked? They ask me, has it ever been tried? Does it actually work? So they don't know. So the importance here is we need to teach and teach them about this. So we asked them this question. Most people would consider using the strategy of non-violence if they learned about its effectiveness in schools and university. 82% said yes. Our follow-up question was, do they teach you that in schools and university? And a huge majority said no. So the idea here is this: we need to teach them and advocate non-violent strategies. And how do we go about doing that? We need to get our teachers. We desperately need to get them on board in our PCV efforts. And of course, we need to include and teach non-violence and creativity in resolving grievances. So when we meet young people, we talk to them about Malala Yousafzai. We show them clips about Mahatma Gandhi. We tell them about Nadia Murad. And these, and the response we get from these young people is, we didn't know. So basically, we are not having a contestation of ideas. We're having just basically one idea being pushed to them, which is violence actually works. And that's not contested. And that's where I think we need to get involved. We need help. We desperately need help. That's what my parents always tell me. You need help, okay? This is Arno Michaelis. In a PCV conference with Hedayah many years ago, he was there. Now, he was involved in white supremacy. His story was basically how he got in and how he got out. Now, we use his story in my part of the world. Now, white supremacy is not a big problem in my part of the world, but his narrative is so powerful. We tell his story, we show his video, and we find to a certain extent, to a great extent, his story reverberates even better, simply because, if you talk about my part of the world, if you talk about religious extremism, people are very defensive. Young people are very defensive. They say, are you talking about me? But if you talk about white supremacy, it allows to pass and slip through their defenses. Christiane Boudreau, who did some fantastic work about how her son got involved in this, such a powerful, compelling story. One mother actually asked me this: if I had seen this video before I supported my children to join violent extremism, things would have been different. She's a Canadian lady, and yet she was able to have such a powerful impact in my part of the world. Prof. Alex Schmidt spoke about amplifying the voice of survivors, and it really works. Vikar is an influencer in my part of the world, and he's a guy who never think of working with the government. I remember my first meeting with him, he wore shorts and I was wearing coat and tie. He was so uncomfortable with me and I was so uncomfortable with him. But he could tell a story in a way that I couldn't. We talked about Nadia Murad. He made a clip which more than 1 million people have seen, and that's a huge number in my part of the world. Air Lives is a singer. We used him in spoken word, poetry. And basically, he is able to reach out to groups of people and tell them about PCV in a way somebody like me would never be able to. So we need their help. We need to get them involved. And getting them involved doesn't actually, it doesn't require huge expenditure. All I had was have a conversation with Arno Michaelis, got his story, and use him electronically. Meaning, he has a short video, put it out there. There's no cost involved. And the impact, I must say, is tremendous. The danger of halfway there radical violent ideas. This is the awful but lawful speech. And many times people say, look, we can't do that. Freedom of expression, we can't stop them from saying what they want to say. While that might be true, we need to contest those ideas. So it does not mean that we lock them up and put them in prison, but we need to go and engage and say, look, that's wrong. When you say violence actually worked, give me the data to back that up. Show me groups that use violence and where it actually worked. And I'll show you groups that use violence and it did not work. I'll show you groups that use violence, gave up violence, and then achieved the objective. So when we contest these ideas, we have the best chance to reach out to our young people. We need to reimagine education. And this is one of the huge things that we are trying to do. We need to go beyond institutions of learning. That means we need to go to faith-based organizations. We need to go to CSOs because they have an ability to reach a group of people that we can't. So often when we have conferences on PCV with young people, we meet a group of people who are already in agreement with us. We are preaching to the converted. And that's terrible, you know. So we need to go effectively to places where they don't want us to be there. And that's where we need help in doing that. And that's where we need teachers. We need this counselors in schools. So here the point is this. We need to expand the conduits of PCVE in education. Right now in schools, they will not touch the subject. And they say, look, it's securitizing the idea of education. And so we meet teachers and we tell them, look, these guys are your students. And if they get involved in extremism, it's a huge problem even to you. And we're not asking you to speak about PCV, but we're asking you to speak about Ismail Beya, to tell about how he fought against violent extremism in his way. And that's not PCV proper, but it's powerful. And here we have realized the ability to utilize sports. When we get a sports person to speak on our behalf, when we organize a sports program, young people come running to join us. We understand now the importance of gaming. 3 weeks ago, I was attending this conference with young people and facilitating this conference with gamers. Night, we have gaming tournaments, Mobile Legend gaming tournaments. I'm not a gamer myself. But during the daytime, it's the bait to get them in. During the daytime, we do the PCVE talks. And we found out that we reached a group that we never even knew existed, which is such a pity. We need to utilize mentoring. And again, we are developing programs where we can get teachers not so much to teach, but to mentor. Because I deal a lot with young people, and that's their cry. They need somebody that not to teach them, but to hear them, to listen to them. We have to understand vulnerability. And that's something, young people, they always portray that, everything is cool, everything is good, but no, they're suffering inside. So vulnerability during the pandemic, whether it's emotional vulnerability, 64%, mental vulnerability, 64%, or physical vulnerability, they are vulnerable. So that was the first question. Are you guys vulnerable? And yeah, to a certain extent, they said, yes, they are vulnerable. Then we asked them this question. I am more willing to befriend an individual regardless of his or her view on violent extremism and hate speech, so long as I am shown sympathy and empathy. And the results were startling. We had 30% who says, look, I might be against violent extremism, but now I'm in such a position that I'm desperate, that I am willing to befriend them if they can show me sympathy and empathy. And what was really, really sad was violent extremists, they knew this. And we found the change in the tone during the pandemic. Are you okay? How are you doing in school? How are you coping? These are violent extremists asking this kind of questions. And it worked. So here the challenge is this. How then do we show them this sympathy and empathy? When you go to educators, they say, look, my job is to teach them a skill set. It is to teach them a set of knowledge. It's not my job to show them sympathy and empathy. So the reality is you have a group of people who need it, a group of people who are getting it from what we would deem violent extremists, and we are not able to do anything about this. We spoke about vulnerability, and we had this thing with gamers I mentioned about, and my job was to find out how much violent extremists was making inroads in the gaming community. And I had a list of 20 questions as a researcher, and I started asking them these questions, And then at one point I said, what's your biggest problem? And the guys told me, sometimes we don't have money to eat. And I was thinking to myself, how can I talk to them about the dangers of violent extremism when their challenge is they don't have money for lunch? So then I realized we don't understand these young people. We don't understand what their concerns are. We are struggling to find out. We think we know and we are telling them, look, this is your main problem. But because of that, can you blame them that they don't listen to us? That basically we speak a language that they don't understand. I do apologize, I'm running out of time. So what is my conclusion? We need to rethink young people. We think we understand them, but many times we don't. I've worked with young people for a long time, and the more I realize that, the more I don't know. And we need to reimagine education, going beyond just the teacher, school mentality, going beyond just higher institutes of higher education, and getting people to help. Thank you very much.